Good evening.
Good evening,
And you're all very welcome. And we look forward this evening now to Dr. Alan Chambers, an expert who knows everything about Tibbot Na Long, as we know, and an expert in that whole. What's very close to us here, because he's buried in the tapestry of the Abbey, Tibbot Na Long, Lord of Mayo. We have a lot of stories about it, good stories, and they're not all true. Sometimes we tell good stories and true stories. So we'll be able to discern from tonight which is true and which is good. But we'll continue on telling the good stories because they're more interesting, always. We welcome Dr. Chambers, and not only is she an expert in that, but she's written many books. Growing Away, of course, is the big one. And then Shadow Lord, which is about Tibbot tonight. Eleanor, Countess of Desmond, and her biography of King Richard, which is a wonderful book. They will be afterwards there. And just in case some of you are here, and some of you are here for the last talk on Cromwell, and the notes that were given, and some of the probably cross folklore from the different parishes, there is a booklet there, and that's on stage too. After the lecture, there will be questions for about now 20 minutes. Yes. And then you might like to see the tomb of Tibbot inside. And then afterwards, upstairs, a cup of tea, a chat, and where we get together. So that's important as well. So without much ado, I now have great pleasure in inviting Dr. Mayo to give us a talk on Tibbot Na Long.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, I've spoken on Great Mount Grace O'Malley and indeed her son in many venues, but I have never been elevated to speak from the altar. So I don't know where I can go after this. It really is the tops, and I thank Father Fahy very much for allowing me that privilege. It is indeed a privilege and a pleasure to be part of the celebrations for the Abbey. The founding of this magnificent edifice, which, rather like the subject of my talk this evening, refused to give in or indeed give up in the face of traumatic events and insurmountable odds. The very name of Tibbot Na Long Burke, Lord Viscount Mayo, at first seems a bit of a contradiction, evoking as it does a mix of traditional Gaelic and English titles. But these titles, ladies and gentlemen, are symbolic of the convoluted role he played as a Gaelic chieftain turned Anglo-Irish knight in one of the most traumatic periods of our past, and perhaps also gives us a clue why he was subsequently airbrushed out of our history. But like the wily character he was, Tibbot Na Long ensured that someday his story would be told by leaving behind a fantastic collection of manuscripts and documents. For almost 400 years, these documents lay forgotten in the home of one of his descendants in Westport House, until they formed the basis for the biography Shadow Lord. But such was the impact Tibbot made on his time, and particularly, may I add, in this part of County Mayo, that folklore, that unscientific yet vital storehouse of the past, ensured that his memory at least would be preserved by the telling and retelling of stories, events and exploits associated with him, down through the centuries from fireside to fireside, particularly in this area. And in my research for his biography, it was absolutely amazing how both the factual evidence that I found and the folklore that I found out about coincided. So let's begin at the beginning. I suppose with the mother like Grace O'Malley, who was called, and I quote, the most notorious woman in all the coasts of Ireland, and a father also called, and I quote, a plundering, warlike, unquiet and rebellious man. It must have guaranteed that Tibbot Na Long, first Viscount Mayo, was destined to make an impact in his own lifetime. At his birth in 1567, both his parents, mother and father, were established as political leaders in County Mayo, indeed within the province of Connaught, and his mother in particular, Ronnie Whale, had made an even bigger impact. At that stage of her life, she was established both as a trader, a pirate, a mercenary, and a lady of extreme wealth, great wealth, who had also inherited land in her own right as a woman from her mother, Margaret O'Malley. Now that comes as a shock to some academics who always made the claim that the Brehon laws would not allow women inherit land. Grace O'Malley did inherit land from her mother, and I'm mentioning that in particular because that became a law case for her son, Tibbot Na Long, in the New Age in the 17th century, but more about that later. His father, Richard, was the Taoiseach to the MacWilliam of Mayo. Now, the MacWilliam of Mayo is a title that is long forgotten, but was in the 16th century of prime importance here. And it traces its background to the de Burgos conquest of Connaught, when the great family, the de Burgos family, split in two. And the upper de Burgos, the MacWilliam Uachtaráin, nearer, of course, to Rome, as we always said. You have that in every denomination. If you were upper, you were closer to Rome. And the MacWilliam Uachtaráin, or the lower MacWilliam, not meaning lower in any status or indeed in terms of warfare, and that meant the MacWilliam of Mayo. Now, the MacWilliam Uachtaráin of Galway eventually became the Earls of Clonricard, while the MacWilliam Lower of Mayo remained completely Gaelicized until the extinction of the title. This is important again in terms of Tibbot's life. His father, Richard in Iron, is called Richard in Iron. Now, the folklore, it's lovely how folklore remembers these people by inventing stories about them. And Richard in Iron was supposed to have gone around in a rusty old suit of armour that he inherited from some remote de Burgos ancestor. But of course, when I begin to look into his life, I find that he is a proprietor of iron mines on his lands near Furness in Burkes. He was chieftain of the Burkes branch of the great Burke family of County Mayo, but most importantly, he was next in line to to succeed to the MacWilliamship. That was at Tibbot's birth. Tibbot's own birth was supposed to be at sea, very appropriately, on one of his mother's galleys. And again, that was a folklore story, but again, I found in the Royal Irish Academy in Dublin an old Irish entry to show that Tibbot Na Long was born aboard his mother's ships. Also, there was another folklore that said that on the day of his birth, Algerian pirates attacked his mother's galley, and of course we all put that down to some kind of Hollywood-style invention. But of course, when we now know that the Barbary Coast pirates not only went to places like Skibbereen, but were also in action off the coast of Mayo, the fact that, or off the coast of Connaught, and of course the fact that his mother was very, very active on the sea at that time, the fact that her galley might have met a corsair from the Barbary Coast was not unlikely. A childhood of a chieftain's son, well, it meant the first thing was fosterage. Fosterage was very much part of the old Brehon way of life. And a senior chieftain, or a chieftain of great power like Richard was, would give his son in chieftains or in fosterage to a local chieftain. And in that way, that chieftain was bound both by honour, right, and also by other obligations to Richard. So the first fostership of Tibbot Na Long occurred in Burkes, in the barony of Burkes, and he was fostered with Edmund MacTibbot Bourke, chieftain of Castlelaffy, another branch of the Burke family. I would like just to talk a little bit about the political situation in Ireland at Tibbot Na Long's birth. It is very, very different to what we would like to think Ireland was at most times, all united against a common foe. I'm afraid that did not apply to 16th century. 16th century Ireland was Ireland at its most disunited. Ireland was carved into around 40 different chieftaincies. Grace O'Malley's father was the chieftain of Oon, around Clou Bay. Richard Nairn was a chieftain of the north of Oon. You had other chieftains all over the province of Connacht, indeed all over Ireland. And there was great disunity, and with that disunity came great intertribal warfare. And that event really became the Achilles heel of the Gaelic world when it was a decade indeed after Tibbot's birth. It was to receive its greatest setback when England turned its eyes on Ireland to conquer it for various reasons that I possibly will go into. Brehon law really ruled the roost here. Common law of England really had not taken hold in Ireland much outside Dublin and the Pale. So Tibbot was reared in this Brehon old Gaelic world that had really not kept pace with time. It had not kept pace with what was happening outside. Remember that just 100 years previously, England was as divided as Ireland was in the 1600s. But it had been moulded together forcibly by the Tudors, who not only won it by might, but also pretended that they won it with the will of God. So you had now established on the throne of England the succession of the mighty Tudors, and no better one of the Tudors was on the throne at the time of Tibbot's birth than the great Queen Elizabeth I, the best of all of them. There was a big difference in the common law of England and the old Brehon law, and this was very, very important in terms of things like land, how one held the land. The land, a chieftain held the land for the clan. Now he might have owned his own particular private land, but once he became chieftain, the clan lands were invested in him. And he was the proprietor of these lands only for his lifetime. They then reverted back to the clan, and a new chieftain was elected, not inherited by the eldest son, as was the common law of England and primogeniture. Also, the succession to the chieftaincies, again, was not by primogeniture. It was the mightiest, the strongest, the most able man was selected. And it was selection from the hand. The 5 generations of the ruling family could compete for the chieftaincies. So you see there's an impermanency there between in succession to land and in succession to leadership that again was taken advantage of by, I suppose, a more simplistic system that had now become established in England. All very important in relation to the story that will unfold about Tibbot Na Long. There was a system of clientship where Tibbot's father, Richard Nairn, would have client lords under him, minor chieftains in and around his area, who would pay him rather godfather-like for his protection. So the old saying, spend me and defend me. I give you money, I give you land, rather like the more feudal system. And you will protect me if an enemy of mine attacks me. So that was the system of clientship that was there. And the most chieftains you had, it wasn't to do with how much land you owned, it was how much power you exerted by being the head honcho in your neighbourhood. And Richard Nairn was, next to the MacWilliam of Mayo, the most powerful lord at that time. Elizabeth in England really never, I suppose, wanted to invade Ireland. She had enough trouble of her own in England and to Spain and on the continent. And almost the conquest or the reconquest of Ireland was almost forced upon her in many ways. Unified under Elizabeth, England was unified acquisitive and exploitive. And when Ireland became the back door which threatened England's security by Spain, then the conquest of Ireland took on a new urgency. And this was all happening as young Tibbot Na Long was growing up as a fostered child with this chieftain, learning the military skills that were essential if he was to ever succeed his father, both as a minor chieftain and hopefully as the MacWilliam of Mayo. As well as being a weak link in England's security armour, Ireland's lands was always looked upon as a gold mine for the younger sons of the English gentry.